They say, at the very least I've heard reporters, people like Chris Hedges, say that sometimes if you need to get something across, showing is a lot better than trying to impose your particular opinion on somebody. Meaning if you can show a story, for the most part, you can get across your opinion sometimes in a way that you don't necessarily have to be overbearing. So I want to do that. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you enjoy this content, please like this video if you like it. Please share it if you like it. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. They demonetize these videos. Excuse me. And at this point, it seems to be rather constant. It's something that I'm just going to have to live with. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you for allowing me to do so. So last year, my wife and I had the opportunity to travel. As you know, if you're watching the show, we were all over the place. I'm sorry, I'm just making sure that there's no oddities with sound. There we are. Yeah, we have the opportunity to travel. So one of the places we got the opportunity to travel through was Israel. While we were in Israel, there were various points along the trip that I needed to get saunas. Like the amount of time I was able to get treatments were limited. So saunas was kind of like a in between. It was a way to kind of get from point A to point B and pull fluid out of, the skin. It was keeping the fluid content down. We get to a remote location, kind of in the middle of nowhere. We get to the location. It's like a gym or something. And my wife and I, we get to the building. We go to the front desk. There's a woman at the counter. And many of the people, and, she starts speaking Hebrew. It's just kind of like a welcome. And of course, I speak only English and barely passable Spanish. I suppose if it was a zombie apocalypse and I was in Mexico, I can get around. But under normal circumstances, that's not necessarily the language I could use. So I'm stuck with English. She hears me speaking English, and she immediately flips to English. And she's like, "Oh, hey, I'm from New York. How are you doing? You're an American?" And she just go babbling along. And her and I are chatting a bit, my wife and I, all of us are talking. And she helps me to get to where I need to get to. She was awesome. Now, here's the catch. That woman is from New York. However, that woman, under the guidelines of the state, gets a plot of land. Meaning, under law, under the guidelines of the state, she has certain rights in that particular country. Interestingly enough, a couple of days ago, this took place. This is Surbar. Hundreds of soldiers and bulldozers attacked the village, knocking over the housing. Israel said it was too close to their wall and it was a security risk. Of course, whatever Israel said, you can imagine that if you lived here, you were already poor, and you just got a lot poorer, considering that you're now homeless. You were already in an open-air ghetto, and they've just knocked down the place to which you found residence. That, at a different perspective, is this. These are people being forcibly removed from their homes. This gentleman is telling the soldier, "Look, I live here. If you need to knock this place down, you can knock this place down in my head. I live here." The soldier is put in a particular position saying, "Look, I don't want to use violence. Just come with me. I don't want to use violence." Now, in this situation, you can understand with the guy's position of, "I'm not leaving here. This is my house." By the same token, a soldier, he's given orders and, my government told me to do it. That's the argument. In which case, he goes and commits violent, horrible acts. Let's keep looking. I have a point.
والله تريد تبين علينا أنت تريد البنيان على روشيلان
زي حيين شيلانو كيف نحن نلاقي حركات أنت مرسم تبايت على روش شيلانو كيف نحن نلاقي حركات.
Would it be wrong for these people to hate these soldiers? Now understand, they're not pissed at them because they're anti-Semitic. They're not pissed at them because they're men. They're not pissed at them for, they're pissed at them because that's their house. They live there. They're being forcibly evicted. They have no idea why. It doesn't come across as being fair to any degree. And whether you want to think fair or otherwise, that's where they live. And their life, already impoverished, is now that much more impoverished. That woman that I met at that gym has more rights to the land than this gentleman whose entire life is here and has been forcibly evicted. At the exact same time this was taking place, where hundreds of buildings, Palestinian homes, were being crushed, and these people were being forcibly evicted at the exact same time this was taking place, Tulsi Gabbard signed her name onto H.R. 216. H.R. 216 is an anti-BDS legislation. Anti-BDS legislation, or BDS, is essentially boycott, divest, sanction. It's a peaceful protest movement against Israeli occupation of that land. An occupation that allows scenes like this, despite international protests, to take place. And people like this to be evicted from their homes. Peaceful protests. Congress, a Congress that can't agree on anything, that spent its time, wasting its time with a Mueller investigation that has screened Russia for 3 years, despite the fact that the rest of the population doesn't care. That Congress gets together and overwhelmingly passes, meaning the House, a resolution that goes against free speech. And I don't care if it's non-binding. The fact that you make a protest against free speech is in and of itself disturbing. One Tulsi Gabbard's name is on that list. Ayanna Pressley is also, by the way. It's notable to mention that there were only 17 people that had the sense enough to say, I am not putting my name on a bill that in any way protests Americans' ability to go out and protest. I'm not going to do that because I am in no way going to challenge the First Amendment, even if it's just a challenge in name only. I don't care. It's the fact that you're willing to even go out there and do that is somewhat problematic. A Congress that can't agree on a goddamn thing goes out and wastes its time affirming something that is already affirmed every day of the year. We agree with Israel. Great. Israel calls itself an apartheid state. And in calling itself an apartheid state, it may not use those words. It calls itself a Jewish state, at least by their own law. It's an apartheid state by definition. When South Africa was an apartheid state and people were trying to pressure South Africa to not be an apartheid state, BDS was a way of doing so. The same thing applies to the brutal occupation that has taken place in Palestine. The goal of it is not for Israel to not exist. The goal of it is for it to not occupy that territory and repress that territory to the point where you have scenes coming across your airwaves like this, let alone the brutal killings that take place when they go in and mow the lawn of sorts. Earl Blumenauer, Andre Carson, Debbie Dingle, Jesus Chewy Garcia, Raul Grava, Pramil Jayapal, Barbara Lee, Thomas Massey, Betty McCollum, Gwen Moore, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Chele Pingree, Mark Pocan, Bobby Rush, Rashida Tlaib, Bonnie Watson Coleman. They are defenders of your Constitution, believe it or not, because the other ones are willing to sell you down the river. This bill didn't have criminal penalties associated with it, but there were other bills that they tried to pass that did. And in various states, they've passed bills that have penalties associated with it. And I've always asked the question, what happens when this hits the courts? I mean, this is clearly against the First Amendment. Any notion of free speech. This flies in the face of any notion of free speech. That you're going to put criminal penalties for somebody that says, I don't like what that government is doing? Are you serious? It's a state. It can be criticized like any other state. If we're talking about Russia, if we're talking about China, if we're talking about India, or if we're talking about Israel, all are equal on that board as legal fictions. It's a state. Stop pretending it's something else. These people did God's work. It has nothing to do with religion, by the way. It has everything to do with whether or not it is for Congress to impinge upon any notion of free speech by even passing a law condemning something that falls under the purview of free speech. Various members in this, including Ilhan Omar, was very strong, Rashid Tlaib also, in denunciating this particular bit of legislation for the exact same reason that I just enunciated. That's astonishing. They're willing to sell you down the river big time. I'm not going to keep this one long, but Tulsi needs to answer for that. Where y'all Tulsi stands at. I told y'all she's trash all the times you defend her. I told you the dimension how trash she is a politician. Can't wait till she drops out. Kills for a living. And the real play for Tulsi would be to attack Willie Brown. Oh, you said that one. Look, you got to be honest with this stuff. Tulsi put her name on this. And the next person who gets the chance to interview Tulsi should ask her, why are you putting your name to this bill of legislation? Does this indeed infringe upon free speech? Even if there is no penalties associated with it, why would you sign your name to something that even protests any notion of free speech? Like, why? I have questions. You should have questions. That's a horrible vote. Shout out to AOC for not making it. That's a horrible vote. Two Mets. Yes, one that stands up against Zionist totalitarian. Let's see. Is there such thing as a good conservative? That's a good question. It depends on what you mean by conservative. If our political spectrum wasn't so fucked up, then maybe. But our political spectrum has gotten to the point of knuckle draggers. I mean, if you were thinking about during FDR's time, you had people who were to the right, but they're to the right still accepted New Deal politics. Like, it's like there may be things that we argue on it, but at the very least, let's ensure that people have food and a job and a standard of living. I mean, that's not where you're at now, though. I mean, you're at this kind of rapacious level of capitalism where conservatives are like, it's a money grab. We're going to get everything that we can get out of this process. You have the last cry of Bernie Sanders, in this case, that tries to, the man on the wall. The problem here is this. At some point, it's overreach. At some point, they get so rapacious that the public get pissed off, and there's a rebound effect. And that rebound effect, you have people like Sanders or AOC who tries to get as much as they can get within the context of that rebound effect and reset the standard. The last time would be like a New Deal time. This time, if you think of for Medicare or for healthcare, I mean, they've been so nasty in regards to the way that they've been getting over on people for healthcare in the United States. And now you have something of a Medicare for all where they say, well, fuck it. Let's just federalize the entire system. That's a overreach, in which case there's a response. I like conservatives are not even human. Well, I don't think that. I mean, touching my ear is not a tell on that. My ear it's just gotta have my earring. Look, it depends on what you're talking about, right? If you take out money out the process, and I know that's like, well, that's impossible, but mental exercise, if you take out money from the process, what's the incentive that pushes people to behave in that way? If that incentive is no longer there for people to behave in that way, then, it's like money makes the process worse. I think that's a no shit, Jamal, of course. But I guess my point is, if you're talking about people, not politicians, if you're just talking about people, then the answer is yes. There are good conservatives just as people. I think sometimes they're short-sighted and they don't necessarily look at it from the overhaul. I think they look at it as a person thing. They just look at it differently. If you're talking about in a political angle or somebody who's a billionaire, no. Yes, that's provocative, but no. But no. I mean, there may be some out there that are decent people, but, at the point where this system kind of propagates itself, there's a point of view of the world that becomes somewhat of a class thing. But just from a person-to-person thing, I've met people who are awesome fucking people who are conservatives. They just, you can have great conversations with them and all. It's not an absolute. All right, I'll end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Yes, next person who gets the opportunity to talk to Rokan or Tulsi Gabbard, please ask him. Please explain this particular vote. Thanks all. Like and share.